tailor-made or one-size-fits-all. With a hybrid, you don't have to choose. That's why insurers are going hybrid with IBM. With Watson on a hybrid cloud, they can use AI to help predict client needs and get the data they need to quickly design coverage for each one. Businesses that want personalization and speed are going with a smarter hybrid cloud using the technology and expertise of IBM. The world is going hybrid with IBM. Visit ibm.com/hybrid cloud. Today and every day, you're doing the impossible with so little time under so much pressure. And for businesses around the world, it's a real challenge because increasing disruption comes with increasing complexity. It's time to rethink everything. Using hybrid cloud and AI, IBM is helping businesses take a scientific approach to invent, discover, and solve problems like no one else. Get a new perspective on working in today's world at ibm.com/think.
Welcome to Stuff to Blow Your Mind, a production of iHeartRadio.
Hey, welcome to Weird House Cinema. This is Rob Lamb.
And I'm Joe McCormick, and it's Godzilla time on the podcast, but maybe a Godzilla you're a little bit less familiar with, one that was new to me as of this week. Today we are doing the Godzilla picture that was too hot for Toho. The Godzilla film that is too radical. It's too dangerous. It must be stopped. It's Godzilla vs. Hedorah.
Yes, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, one I had never seen before, and I think, I've seen a fair number of Godzilla films over time, and I think I tend to have watched the ones that were either on TBS back in the day. They would show them in like the afternoon when I was a kid, or ones that were featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000 later on. But there of course have been tons of Godzilla films over the years, and this is one that simply fell through the cracks for me. I did not know it existed until this week when you said, "Hey, why don't we do a kaiju movie? Why don't we do either this one or that one?" And I looked and I saw, well, it looks like Godzilla vs. Hedorah is available on HBO Max as part of the Turner Classic Films selection there. Well, let's do that one. It's the easiest one for me to see, and I'm so glad I did.
The other option we were looking at, it's funny because the two movies have a kind of similar premise. The other one we were looking at was The Space Amoeba, which does not have Godzilla in it. It's a kaiju movie about an alien microbe that lands on an island in the South Pacific, and there it transforms some examples of local wildlife into giant monsters. I think it makes a big squid and a big crab and one other thing I don't recall. But in this movie, we also have an alien microbe, I think coming from a gaseous nebula, or as speculated by one character later on, from a planet covered in sludge, a sludge-like planet.
Dark, sludgy planet. Mm-hmm.
Dark, sludgy planet that has come to Earth. And whereas many aliens would say, "Take me to your leader," this one says, "Take me to your smokestacks. I need to get high."
Take me to your pollution, yes. And the one character even says, "Well, isn't this good? It can eat up all our pollution." And they're like, "No, it's just too destructive."
That's right. Yeah, so this is a pollution monster that huffs airborne particulates straight out of smokestacks. He is a brimstone beast from space that exudes sulfurous gas and acid and poison, and is bad news all around.
Yeah, so one thing about this film is this, first of all, this film is very much a kaiju versus film. So it is going to largely hit the same plot points you're familiar with. Some new creature presents a threat to humanity. An established veteran, in this case Godzilla, shows up to battle it. Human characters watch on as battle proceeds. Your good guy monster is going to be on the ropes for a little bit, but is going to have a big comeback and eventually win the day. So Godzilla vs. Hedorah is going to give you all of those points, but there's so much additional weirdness here. There's so much visual flair in this film. I feel like it really stands apart from pretty much all the other kaiju films that I've seen. I'm seriously entertained putting it above Shin Godzilla as my favorite Godzilla movie.
I was thinking about the same thing. This is a new favorite for me, definitely in my top three now. And much like you, I also have Shin Godzilla near the top of the heap. But mainly, it's the reason I was so enthralled by this movie was its novelty. Having seen many kaiju movies, it has a lot of the familiar elements. And in fact, I would say the familiar elements are actually the weakest part of this movie. As far as the big monster meat slam goes, I mean, there is a extended 30-minute beatdown at the end of the movie that is okay. It's not one of the best, but it's also not one of the worst. But it is the other elements of this movie that really make it an absolute standout. Without a doubt, the most bizarre Godzilla movie I've ever seen. In that this movie believes it is art.
Yes.
Absolutely. No question about this.
Yeah.
It thinks it's art and it's making a statement and maybe it's going to change the world.
Yeah, it's probably the best example of an avant-garde Godzilla film, and that's one of the reasons why it's so watchable. It's also one of the reasons that that its director was criticized back in the day, and indeed never directed another Godzilla film. You'll see his directorial credit on IMDb for some other Godzilla films, but that's because they utilized footage from previous films in those pictures.
That's right. So the director was Yoshimitsu Banno, and you will frequently see references to this as the movie that ended his Godzilla career. You know, he could have gone on to do all kinds of Godzilla stuff, but like I said at the beginning, this was just too hot for Toho. It was too weird. It was too radical. It was rocking the boat. You can't make movies like this, man.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of stories about how producer Tomoyuki Tanaka responded to this. There's at least one story in which he said, "You've ruined Godzilla," and there was a lot of anger. And I was there's a great blog post about this from Patrick Galvin at TohoKingdom.com. You can look it up. He has a Yoshimitsu Banno in memoriam post that goes through a lot of this and talks about his achievements, his what he gave the Godzilla franchise, but then also how it was received at the time. So yeah, this is a movie that was maybe ahead of its time, and I think stands the test of time because it is doing things differently.
So what is it doing differently? I could list a number of things. One thing I will say is the aesthetic differences. It's much more freeform than any other Godzilla movie I've ever seen in that it inserts things that are outside the normal stream of plot development. So it has musical numbers. It has animated segments. They're short, but there's several of them throughout the movie, and they were some of my favorite parts because they're beautiful animation. It's almost like a Godzilla movie with elements of like the Yellow Submarine movie and other sort of late 60s psychedelic films that involved a lot of exciting visuals with abstract colors and dancing in a club.
Yeah, and also, there's also a huge cultural element to this as well. There's a sense of the youth movement and the youth culture, and their rise and their importance and their part in the fight. Generally, in a kaiju movie, who do you see fighting the kaiju? Who's raising arms against the kaiju? It is the military, right?
It's the authorities, yeah.
Yeah, and in this, we see the authorities playing a part, but also failing in ways, and it's the youth who are leading the charge at one point.
Yes, in this movie, ultimately, I think the authorities are portrayed as almost entirely incompetent. That they are not the ones preserving order. Ultimately, it's Godzilla who's the one who is preserving order. And Godzilla, I was trying to think about what Godzilla represents in this movie, because I think you can make a case that a lot of the Godzilla films have a it's hard to say they have a very clear message, but to the extent that there is a message in them, it's a kind of vague environmental one. It's that we have done things to the earth, and in doing things to the earth through maybe weapons testing or industry, we have upset the natural order and we have unleashed forces that are beyond our control. But like I said, I think that critique is, in most Godzilla movies, very buried under the surface, very vague. In this movie, it's the opposite. It's not only overt, it's extremely overt. They are screaming in your face with an environmental message.
Yeah. They definitely lean into the idea that Godzilla is it's not just a big monster for kids, though they acknowledge that, but he is also something of an embodiment of the nation's or a culture's will. Like Godzilla represents, in a sense, humanity's struggle against pollution, against destructive elements of the world. And the question of, can Godzilla defeat this enemy, is ultimately a question of whether we have the public will to confront it.
That's another transition. I would say originally Godzilla is sort of the manifestation of us having unleashed forces beyond our control by our upsetting of the natural order. In this movie, he is the thing that fights back against the monster created by industrial pollution.
Yeah.
Now I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer to this. One of the fun things we see with the Godzilla arc is that in the very first Toho Godzilla movie, Godzilla is the antagonist of the film. Like, you know, this is a dangerous, scary, dark monster that that brings great destruction. But by the later films, Godzilla is often sort of the hero of the film, is portrayed as a force who is inherently dangerous, but which ultimately fights against a force that is even more threatening or even more malevolent. And that's the case in this movie. So I wonder, like, how exactly does that arc develop? And is that the case for other movies? Like, I've watched some of the Gamera movies where, you know, Gamera is doing the same thing Godzilla is doing in the later movies. Gamera is good, and he's fighting against the bad monsters. Was that always the case with Gamera, or did Gamera start as bad like Godzilla did?
If memory serves, Gamera followed the exact same track. Like, Gamera in the first film is a threat that has to be overcome and launched into space. I think ultimately, and this would be for a more in-depth discussion later, perhaps drawing on the work of people who've maybe thought longer and harder about this than we have. But I imagine there are a lot of comparisons to be made with the way deities change over time. You know, we can, I don't know if it would be the exact same trajectory or would be kind of an inverse trajectory in some cases, but I wonder how, you know, in a loose sense anyway, Godzilla is a deity. He exists not in the mythic realm of you know, of, say, like the ancient world or even modern religion, but he's in the film myth world, and is therefore not quite the same as our traditional ideas of deity, but perhaps subject to some of the same changes in the way we perceive him.
Well, maybe before we go on any further, we should hit some trailer audio.
All right, let's have it. This, I believe, is from the English trailer for Godzilla vs. Hedorah.
Out of the polluted waters it came, to become the most fearful menace that ever threatened mankind. Feeding, growing ever more deadly on smog. Only one force dared stand up to its overpowering evil.
Godzilla!
Nothing man can do can stop the smog monster. Can Godzilla save the Earth from this mastodon of destruction?
All right, sounds good to me. And we should, of course, note that in the U.S., this, I think, was originally released as Godzilla versus the Smog Monster.
Yeah, that's right. Though, from what I understand in the movie, the monster is not made of smog. The monster is made mostly of waterborne pollutants and then comes out onto land to huff the smog.
Yeah, he's made out of, like, sludge and minerals and all.
Yeah.
Quick bit of trivia. In Germany, this film was released as Frankenstein's Battle Against the Devil's Monster.
That doesn't make any sense.
This was new to me, but apparently in the German release of Godzilla films, it was often explained that Dr. Victor Frankenstein created the monsters that Godzilla fights. And it just had to do with how they were releasing them at the time. So you had multiple Toho films. Toho did some Frankenstein films about giant Frankensteins. And I checked. It's okay if I call them Frankensteins. I checked with Frankenstein's monster on this. But this sort of set the precedent for how you would release a big monster movie in Germany.
Yeah, I remember reading a few weeks ago about a movie I'd never heard of before that it is directly a Frankenstein kaiju movie, not just called Frankenstein. It's like about, now that I'm about to say this really sounds wrong, but I think what it is a Nazi scientist takes Frankenstein's brain to Japan for study, and there it gets it somehow gets turned into a giant monster.
Yep, I believe that's right.
Okay. Strange.
Yeah,
all right.
Maybe we'll come back to it. We're talking about doing some Frankenstein films eventually.
All right, I guess we should come back to talk about the director of Godzilla vs. Hedorah, who was, again, Yoshimitsu Banno.
Yes, director, also co-writer. He lived 1931 through 2017. This was his first and only Godzilla movie. Again, you'll see him credited on the Gigan and the Megalon movies, but that's just because they utilize older footage. He'd previously served as assistant director and second assistant director on some really notable Akira Kurosawa pictures, including Throne of Blood in 1957. That's that wonderful samurai Macbeth movie. And also The Hidden Fortress in 1958, which I think is often cited as one of George Lucas's influences in the creation of the original Star Wars picture.
Both great films.
Yes. I've also read that Banno was very much a part of the Toho film system. So he came up in Toho and he studied under several notable Toho directors.
I believe his grip on this film is strong because unlike some other kaiju films, this is one in which I detect not just a Toho house style, but I feel a really strong, bold, individual director's vision guiding the whole thing.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's why, at the time, there seems to have been tension with producer Tanaka over this. Mm-hmm. It seems like he fell out of good graces with Toho and ultimately went on to be more of a producer. He was EP on the 2014 American Godzilla movie, and I believe he's credited, even though these occurred after his death, I think he's credited on Godzilla King of the Monsters from 2019 and 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong. But yeah, I think this is the reason why he was controversial at the time, but is memorable today. There have been so many Godzilla films. How many of them are really worth looking up and seeing? If you're not a completist, I would say this is one that's worth going back and seeing.
Yeah, totally. And it's different than a lot of the other best ones because I would say a lot of the other best Godzilla movies, apart from the first one is very dark and gloomy. A lot of the other best ones are very bright and lively and sort of fast-moving and fun. This one is also overall dark and gloomy, but it's excellently dark and gloomy.
Yeah. All right, so there was another writer on this, Takeshi Kimura, who lived 1912 through 1988, a studio writer for Toho. He was involved in more than 30 films, including some really notable ones, including Rodan, The Mysterians. Oh, he was the writer of Matango. Allegedly,
he believed this was his finest work.
It is a fine work. We may have to come back to Matango. This is about an island where a fungal infection turns humans into myconid mutations. It's pretty fabulous. So yes, Matango's worth checking out. Kimura also worked on Frankenstein versus Baragon. This was a giant Frankenstein movie from Toho. The War of the Gargantuans, King Kong Escapes, Destroy All Monsters, and of course this wonderful Godzilla film.
Takeshi Kimura is interesting because I was finding a lot of very tantalizing biographical details about him online, but not in very solid-looking sources, and I couldn't find them backed up anywhere that looked more solid. So frustratingly, I can't report a lot about him with confidence. But if, for example, some of the user submitted biographies I found of him on various sites have any truth to them, he was a strange and interesting figure. He was allegedly known for writing Toho monster movies with a more gloomy outlook and serious political themes as opposed to the happy-go-lucky beatdowns of other, repeat kaiju screenwriters.
Mm. Well, as we turn to the cast here, let's go right to the beatdown. We're going to talk about the human characters played by human actors, but let's start with the monsters.
Oh, yeah. So here's something about this movie. Despite the fact that it has a much darker tone, the Godzilla in this movie is kind of sassy. I really detect a sense of humor in Godzilla's gestures and expressions in this film. There's even a really funny moment later on where the military is trying to do something to defeat the opposing monster and fails, and Godzilla does almost kind of a shrug like, oh boy, do I have to do everything myself? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is a little bit of sass. He's a bit of a showboat at times. I mean, he's on the ropes a lot in this.
Yes.
But he's a little bit of a showboat in a few scenes, and he also takes some really inventive bumps. Like he'll get shot with a laser and do a complete front flip. So there are times like that where I was really admiring the performance. And indeed, the performer here is Haruo Nakajima, who lived 1929 through 2017. He is is kind of an all-star of the Godzilla franchise. He played Godzilla in 12 consecutive films. He was also in Mothra and the War of the Gargantuas, as well as Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. Most people forget that in the original cut of that, the Seven Samurai battled a giant monster. No, not really. But he played a non-monster in that. But generally, he's considered a legend of the rubber monster suit, the rubber suit actor par excellence.
I haven't seen Mothra in a long time, but I remember that one is known for being one of the best of the Meat Slams. It's like a really great monster throwdown.
Now, the enemy in this, Hedorah, is played by Kenpachiro Satsuma, who was born in 1947 and, as of this recording, is still alive. And while he plays Godzilla's enemy in this picture, Satsuma would go on to play the King of Monsters himself after Nakajima retired. So Satsuma served as Godzilla from 1984 through 1995.
Seeing those dates, though, did make me a little bit sag with sadness as I imagine the transition from Godzilla and his monster enemies being a person in a suit to being a CGI creation.
Yeah, I mean, you got to love the suit, and you know, I think there've been whole documentaries about what was required of these gentlemen, because these were very physical performances. They involve suits that were often not very well ventilated, and you're sweating profusely inside them. And as we mentioned, like with Godzilla, there's a certain, it's not just a stammer around and smash a building. There's a certain physicality to the performance that really shines through. You have to portray more than just brute lizard strength or anything like that. There is a character there that the actor is portraying.
It's crazy how much we have to pay for outdated, impersonal healthcare, and even crazier that we all just accept it. It's time to face facts. Healthcare is backwards. Luckily, there's Forward, a new approach to primary care that's surprisingly personal and refreshingly straightforward. Forward never makes you feel like just another patient. Backed by top-rated doctors and the latest tech, Forward gives you access to personalized care whenever you need it. Using in-depth genetic analysis and real-time blood work, Forward's top-rated doctors provide you with in-depth insights to better understand your genetics, mental, and physical health. They then create custom, easy-to-understand plans to help guide you to achieving long-term health. With Forward, you get unlimited in-person visits with your doctor and access to care anytime via the Forward app, all for one flat monthly fee. It's time to stop accepting backwards healthcare and start moving your health forward. Visit GoForward.com today to learn more. That's GoForward.com.
Tailor-made or one-size-fits-all. With a hybrid, you don't have to choose. That's why insurers are going hybrid with IBM. With Watson on a hybrid cloud, they can use AI to help predict client needs and get the data they need to quickly design coverage for each one. Businesses that want personalization and speed are going with a smarter hybrid cloud using the technology and expertise of IBM. The world is going hybrid with IBM. Visit ibm.com/hybrid cloud.
All right, well, let's get into the human characters now. Most of these characters are going to be members of the Yano family, the Yano family being the key family of humans. And let's start with the child, the boy. This is Hiroyuki Kawase playing Ken Yano. And this actor was born in 1964. Child actor, was also, I think he showed up in 1973's Godzilla versus Megalon as well. And he wasn't in much, but he was in a TV series called Saru no Gundam, which I believe is Army of the Apes, if you translate it. This was eventually cut and released as a film in the U.S. by Sandy Frank as Time of the Apes.
Oh,
Mystery
I know that
Science
one.
Theater 3000 viewers will be familiar with this film, which is a lot of fun, but I have never had the chance to watch the original TV series, but there's a lot of it, and it has huge fans in Japan. People still follow it, and it seems like there's a lot more. Like what you see in Time of the Apes is very much a compressed plot line. There's apparently a lot more going on. There's a robot in it. I would love to know more, and I'd love to hear from anyone who's watched it in full. I don't think it's been really widely available on DVD or Blu-ray or even streaming services outside of Japan.
Now, Rob, I have a kaiju question. Maybe you can shed some light on this for me.
Okay.
In Godzilla vs. Hedorah, this young boy, Ken, has a kind of psychic connection with the monsters. He has apocalyptic visions of the smog creature Hedorah, and he has he sort of has omens about when Godzilla will appear to save the day. So, and this is not the only film where there is some kind of psychic or at least emotional bond between the kaiju monster and a young child. That's often true in like the Gamera movies. And do you know, is there a reason for this recurring theme?
I don't know. It's one of those things that is often with Gamera. It's like Gamera is a friend of children. You know,
Right,
there is this innate connection. I don't think I have personally seen a kaiju film other than this one where it's described as an overt psychic link, a telepathic link between monster and child, like there is some sort of sacred bond there. I feel like it's something, and I could be wrong on this because I'm not a kaiju movie expert or a Godzilla expert or anything, but I feel like in this case, our screenwriters said, well, obviously this link is here. Let's actually explain what it is a bit, to a certain extent, while still retaining its mystery.
Okay. I mean, maybe it could just be that you need to have some kind of demonstration of an emotional connection between the monster and the human characters, and maybe it's just natural to assume that only a child has the moral purity to have that connection with the big beast.
Now, if we do go back to that idea of Godzilla as an actual deity, it is interesting the use of... In this film, I don't know if you noticed some of these details, but first of all, the boy, Ken, he has toy Godzillas, and he has something like a Godzilla shrine set up. And this is kind of lightly juxtaposed with the casual use of tiny amulets and visions of, I think, like the Buddha that are arranged around the television sets in other scenes.
Yes.
So I don't know how much they're really trying to say with that, but I feel like if one wants to really chew on the matter, you can definitely start making those connections.
I love the fact that Ken is playing with Godzilla dolls in this movie, because it's like that scene in Halloween 3 where Tom Atkins is sitting at the bar and he's watching the first Halloween movie on a TV.
That's pretty good. All right, let's move on to some of these other human characters. So the matriarch of the Yano family is Toshi Yano, played by Toshi Kimura. She acted in such pictures as Sword of the Beast, Revenge, and The Three Outlaw Samurai. And then Akira Yamauchi plays Dr. Toru Yano, the patriarch of the family. He lived 1921 through 1993. This seems to be his biggest role, but he also had a part in Lone Wolf and Cub, Baby Cart in the Land of Demons from 1971. This is, of course, a classic of the genre and was also a major inspiration on the Mandalorian TV series.
So he plays the scientist character. Usually in these movies, you need at least one scientist character who's there to figure out the nature of the new threat. And so he's some kind of biologist who has an early encounter with the Hedorah beast in the water and ends up with a big sulfuric acid burn on his face. And there's a very funny scene later on where he's trying to solve the problem, and he's lying awake, and his wife comes in and says something like, she's like, "Stop thinking about Hedorah and go to bed."
Yeah, he spends a lot of the picture kind of bedridden and recovering from his injuries.
Yeah.
All right. We also have a couple of characters who are not members of the Yano family, but are very close with them. The first of all is the character Yukio Kyuchi, played by Toshio Shiba. And this is the youth with the really captivating eyes.
I think Yukio is supposed to be Toshi's brother, the Ken's mother's brother, so Ken's uncle.
Okay, all right. That was kind of lost on me, I guess.
But otherwise he's just like a young guy who hangs out with the family and then later goes to a psychedelic nightclub.
Yeah. Shiba had a long TV and film career, including the 1971 kaiju movie Mirror Man, and I think he's still active. He was born in 1947.
He has amazingly distinctive eyes. He's one of those people who, you've probably had this experience before, where I saw him and I was like, oh, he looks so familiar. What have I seen him in before? And I looked and I couldn't find anything. So yeah. I think maybe I've never seen him in anything before. He just has such a distinctive look that he seemed familiar. Yeah, same. All right, and then we also have a character by the name of Miki Fujinomiya. This played by the singer Kiki Omari.
This is, I think, her only film role, but she does seem to have had a much richer career as a singer. And it looks like she's still active, at least on Japanese language social media. She seems to have a following as being, I mean, it's kind of like, I guess, cinematically, it's kind of like having been a Bond girl if you were a Godzilla girl. I think there's actually a documentary about like Godzilla girls, and she's featured in it.
She has a fabulous musical number in this. There are multiple musical numbers in this movie, actually.
Yeah, but she has a lot of style. She brings a style and hipness to the film that certainly stands the test of time. And finally, I'm going to mention the composer is Richiro Manabe, who lived 1924 through 2015. He has 114 score credits on IMDb. I'm not sure if he's responsible though for the opening music. I guess he is. We'll get to that in a minute. But it has really nice opening music, a really nice theme song they keep returning to. It's really nice. It's just great. I did read that Guy Hemrick did the lyrics for the English version. I have not heard that because the version we watched is the one on HBO Max. It's up there with the TCM collection, and it is in the original Japanese with subtitles. But I guess there was an English language version of it, like they dubbed it for release in the States. And Hemrick is the guy who did a lot of lyrics for beach movies back in the day, stuff like Beach Blanket Bingo and Muscle Beach Party. So I'm just going to guess here, but I'm guessing that his lyrics did not retain the strong and dire environmental message that we find in the actual Japanese lyrics.
Maybe not. The beach movies, the bikini movie, the peak of human artistic achievement.
All right, well, let's get into the plot a bit here.
All right, well, one thing this movie really does is it sticks to its themes. It hits you right with them at the outset, and then it does not give up. So you start with, of course, as always, the classic glorious Toho logo, and then very first thing you see, smokestacks.
Yep.
Billowing clouds of soot, rushing water slicked with oil and green foam. The message is clear. The earth is disgusting. The earth is just ruined. And then you see water. And what's this? What's coming out of the water? Is it a slimy, cancerous garbage bag with red crocodile eyes boiling up to the surface? That's right. You see Hedorah poking up out of the water right at the top. Just no waiting at all.
Now, you don't see all of him, though. He's peeking at you.
No, much like a crocodile, like looking up over the top of the water, you just see a kind of the pebbled surface of the top of his head and the eyes looking out there. And he has these vertically oriented red eyes that are very, very prominently featured throughout this movie. In fact, I know eyes somehow seem to be a theme of the film. Because remember, his eyes are his power. Godzilla partially defeats him by pulling his eyes out and electrocuting them.
Yeah.
But as soon as you see Hedorah, title card, Godzilla versus Hedorah, and then bam, straight to a James Bond style musical introduction. Amazing. And when I say James Bond style, I really mean it, as in there's like a glamorous singer doing a theme song for the movie over colorful abstract backgrounds, just like in a James Bond title sequence.
Yeah, this track, by the way, is called Give Back the Sun! ! And you can find this on whatever your streaming music site of choice happens to be. I'll also try to include this embedded on the blog post for this episode at samutamusic.com.
I had one of those moments where I was watching this by myself, but I just wanted to be looking around to find somebody else in the room. Like, are you seeing this? Are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? The song is tremendous. I loved it.
Yeah, but I mean, because the lyrics are so solid and gloomy, and it's an interesting juxtaposition between the tone of the lyrics and the style of the song. But then, we have this this fabulous splash of color behind her as she's singing. This Bond sense of wonder, and it's kind of, I guess, the stuff behind her too, with the kind of like oil lights. It's like the Joshua Light show, that stuff you see in a lot of like psychedelic performances. So we have a strong opening with psychedelia and music and fashion, but then also scenes of sludge and pollution. And I have to say, in the movie Frog, when we talked about frogs in a previous episode of Weird House, we talked about the problem of creating fake-looking garbage, fake-looking pollution. And I feel like this movie nails its pollution. The pollution looks real, and yet has a surreal quality to it that feels like it is art.
It's disgusting, yeah.
Yeah.
The lyrics of the song, it's all like, the birds and the fish, they are all dead. It's the Goldfinger song, but it's about pollution. And there's a great part where in the verse, she's just listing off names of chemicals. She's singing mercury, cobalt, cadmium, all life is gone. The fields and the mountains are silent. And there's like green bubbles in the background. And then when she gets to the line, there's no one left on earth. This also ties back to our discussion from Frogs, because what is the single piece of garbage or litter that conveys squalor better than anything else? It is a discarded doll. And what do you see here floating in the oil and the trash? It is a filthy, discarded doll. Or maybe it's a mannequin, but it's a doll mannequin humanoid shape.
Yeah, it's perfect. The plastic likeness of the human form, discarded in the plastic strewn, polluted mess, this patina that encompasses our culture.
Oh, and there's a grandfather clock floating in the muck.
That's pretty great too.
So good.
So this movie really comes out strong. A lot of kaiju movies are just about like, it doesn't even like, you just want to skip to the big battle at the end, like the big battle. And the destruction and the monster beatdown, that's all that matters usually. In this film, everything else is done to such a high level. I feel like you'd be hard-pressed to find a Godzilla movie or any kaiju movie that is more interesting in its scenes that are not about monsters battling.
I totally agree. In fact, it was inverted for me. The only time in this movie that I did start to get a little bored was during the big monster fight toward the end.
Mm-hmm. Which does go on a bit long, but I'm not even sure that's an appropriate criticism for me to make of a giant monster movie.
But I do just want to reiterate one more time. You are correct. This movie passes the fake garbage test. It's not like in Frogs, like where you're seeing discarded beer cans that look like somebody just drank them.
Yeah.
But from here, we go straight into the action, and it is what we mentioned before, a young boy playing with Godzilla dolls. There's actually pretty interesting framing in this scene. As we've said many times, this is a visually interesting movie. It's got it's got a good sense of mise en scène, to be pretentious about it. Interesting photography, interesting framing. So this boy is playing with Godzilla dolls on an idyllic grassy hillside that overlooks a vast urban landscape that's just covered with smokestacks, like a valley of thorns.
Yeah.
But he's got this Godzilla shrine and is surrounded by flowers, and it's beautiful. And here we get to meet the main human characters, the members of the boy's family. The boy, of course, is Ken, and we meet his father, Dr. Toru Yano, who's a marine biologist, his mother, Toshi, his uncle or friend, Yukio, I think his uncle. And Ken and Yukio are talking at the beginning, and Yukio's like, "Hey, is Godzilla your favorite?" And Ken says, "Yes, he's a Superman." Is he a man? I don't know. I mean, I guess you could certainly say he is super compared to man.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're hanging around when their unusual fish guy shows up. There's this guy named Mr. Gohei, and as soon as he arrives, they're like, "Oh, hello, have you brought us another unusual fish?" So I think it's because the father's a marine biologist that they've got a go-to guy for unusual fish.
Yeah, and indeed the father, what he has various jars of strange specimens that he's collected lining the wall. Great set.
Yeah, and so Mr. Gohei brings in this specimen, which looks like a gigantic tadpole. It's like a fist-sized tadpole, but they conclude that it cannot be a tadpole because Mr. Gohei caught it at the prime spot for shrimp fishing in Suruga Bay. And do tadpoles live in the ocean? The father says, no, they do not. And Mr. Gohei notes, Suruga Bay is getting really, really bad. Like, he didn't catch a single shrimp there this time, and it's almost as if the world is sort of is failing, is giving out on them. And then meanwhile, once again, this movie does not make you wait on developing things. The family starts watching reports on TV about a giant creature that's breaking up ships in Suruga Bay. Like, oil tankers are coming into the bay, and they're crashing into each other and then getting snapped in half, almost as if something is wanting to like drink the oil out of the boats.
Yeah, the pacing in this film is excellent leading up to full monster reveal.
Yeah, and so, of course, it's investigation time. The scientist and the scientist father and Ken have to go into the bay and see what's going on. So Ken hangs out on the rocks by the shore while Dr. Yeno goes into the water to see what's up. And we get to see some underwater sequences. One of the things I loved, I didn't know what to make of this. There's a piece of trash sunk to the bottom of Saruga Bay that looks like an artificial swan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's just there. Meanwhile, Ken up on the rocks is like prying up mussels, and he discovers that they're empty and the crabs are bleached and dead. So it's just, this place has been ruined by pollution. Everything's dead. It almost reminded me of the recent episodes we did about marine mucilage.
Yeah.
But here I think we get our first vision of Hedorah. In fact, well, it's a combination scene because Hedorah actually does appear in one form, but also Ken is having visions of Hedorah that seem to go beyond what Hedorah is actually doing in this scene. Did you understand it the same way?
Well, there was a lot coming at me at this point. I think I was just like generally geeking out at how terrific this was visually. But yeah, like the father, the doctor, is having his own encounter underwater, and then Ken is encountering all this stuff above the water. Yeah, it's and is this when we start getting the cartoons?
No, that's not yet. Not yet. This scene finishes with like Ken being confronted by Hedorah, and Hedorah like flies over him, and he reaches up with a knife and like cuts part of it. Yes,
this is the Free Willy moment. It's like the moment in Free Willy, except imagine that instead of it being an orca, it was a sludge monster, and instead of touching the creature, you were driving a knife up into its sludge belly. That's literally what happens, and it's terrific.
Ken does a really great sludge belly slicing. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, Dr. Yeno down in the water is severely burned. And so we go back to the house, and he's got bandages all over his face. He has been attacked. And we learned a number of things. We learned that Hedorah, he's already got a name. Now he's named after a type of sludge called Hedero. I don't know what Hedero means. But yeah, soon after this, we get our first cartoon sequence, which these cartoons are absolutely wonderful. This one was labeled Happy Hedorah, and it very much reminds me of the animation style of the Blue Meanies in the Yellow Submarine movie.
Yeah, there's a real sense of weirdness and whimsy to them, and it's just fabulous. I wish there were actually more animated sequences in this film because they just do a great job of breaking up the pacing. And just, upping the visual pizzazz of the whole feature.
These days, you have to keep everything moving and reinvent the wheel. With a hybrid, you can do both. That's why manufacturers are going hybrid with IBM. With Watson on a hybrid cloud, factories can use AI to automate the little things so they can focus on the next big thing. Businesses that want to innovate at scale are going with a smarter hybrid cloud using the technology and expertise of IBM. The world is going hybrid with IBM. Visit ibm.com/hybrid cloud. Today and every day, you're doing the impossible with so little time under so much pressure. And for businesses around the world, it's a real challenge because increasing disruption comes with increasing complexity. It's time to rethink everything. Using hybrid cloud and AI, IBM is helping businesses take a scientific approach to invent, discover, and solve problems like no one else. Get a new perspective on working in today's world at ibm.com/think.
Now, like the last episode, I don't think from here I'm going to do a complete like scene-by-scene breakdown of the whole movie, but just maybe wanted to focus on some things that caught our attention as we went through, because this is a kaiju movie. You can probably guess basically the structure it takes. The Hedorah monster becomes increasingly menacing, attacks the city until eventually Godzilla appears to fight it off, and then it comes back even stronger, and now it looks like Godzilla and the people are in trouble, but then Godzilla and the people come up with ways of fighting back, and it's pretty standard.
Yeah, there's going to be some buildings screwed up. There's going to be some sort of large-scale technological approach to fighting the monster with mixed results. All that stuff is in play. You will not be surprised by anything that actually happens from a plot standpoint for the most part, but some of the specific choices they make are still amazing.
One of the main ones I would say is in the first big Hedorah attack scene where he comes out of the water and he attacks the land. He comes out of the water to huff smokestacks. Mm-hmm. But the way they set that scene up is that we see I think Yukio is there at the nightclub scene, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He seems to be having, I don't know, it's a scene where he's drinking, like he's just down some sort of cocktail or some sort of alcohol on the rocks, and then he kind of looks at the glass like he's having mixed thoughts about what he just drank. He has a love-hate relationship with this cocktail, and he's dressed in this really cool outfit. He's got this wonderful, colorful shirt on and this weird tie that I absolutely love, and meanwhile, the nightclub itself is just amazing. You got more Joshua Light Show stuff going on behind them. You've got this. You've got Kiki Omari doing some sort of a performance, and she's wearing this weird naiad costume with like nautical details on it. It's very psychedelic. It's just a really cool nightclub sequence. You watch it and you want to be there.
Yeah, love this sequence. It's so strange and it's so good, and I think they're in a way reprising the song from the opening, or at least playing on variations of it, because both of them have that phrase. They keep saying "give it back," which I think means like give the natural resources back to the earth. But it's so strange because from there we go from the song in the nightclub to, first of all, a Hedera prank call to the police station. Did you understand this?
I don't think I quite got this. This was a section of the film where I started watching it with my son too, so I might have been slightly distracted as we talked about what was going on screen.
And then, so you see a police officer answer the phone and say like, "Hello, who is it?" And then he's like, "That's ridiculous. Hedera is a sea monster." So somebody's calling and saying they're Hedera, maybe.
Oh, or maybe they're just reporting. They're like, "Hey, Hedera's attacking the city," and they're like, "No, it can't be. Hedera lives in the sea." Because one of the themes here is that Hedera is going through a transformation. He's going from an aquatic form to a quadrupedal form. Ultimately, he goes through a flying phase and then into a bipedal form for the final fight, though he also backtracks to a flying form a little bit at will.
I think you're right. That must be how to understand it, because my version didn't make any sense. I was like, what's with this prank call? But yeah, no, I think he's saying somebody reports Hedera being on land, and he's like, no, that can't be because Hedera is in the water. Mm-hmm. But what does Hedera do once Hedera comes on land? Just slips its mouth right over the top of a smokestack and starts huffing the gas.
Yeah, and of course, in all of this, Hedera is also emitting like sulfuric acid clouds. Yes. And either at this point or very shortly afterwards, we start seeing scenes of it just like obliterating crowds, like turning people to skeletons in the street.
Yes. People literally just turn into piles of bones.
Yeah.
But we also watch Hedera, like Hedera has these tumor-looking things, these bumps all over its body. Can we describe Hedera? I don't even know how to say what Hedera looks like. Hedera looks like a big ball of garbage with like trailing slime tentacles that has these vertically oriented red eyes.
Yeah, and he's kind of glistening, kind of sparkling. Mm-hmm. It's really quite an ambitious and effective monster costume, because if you see enough kaiju films, you realize there are only so many things you can really do with a human in a suit. Or the use of puppetry, and there are limitations in both areas. And I feel like they did a great job with this costume in that it's clearly built around a bipedal human performer, and yet it does have that feel of some sort of amorphous sludge monster.
Yeah, so this horrible thing is attacking the city. What's going to happen? Is Godzilla going to come and save the day? Well, we had a hint earlier that he would, because I think was it that Ken was writing an essay for school when he said, like, I think this is what it is. Ken is writing an essay for his second grade class, and it says something like, you know, the water is polluted with cadmium and mercury and all this, and then it ends with saying, I bet Godzilla would be mad if he saw this.
Yes. And then eventually he has like a visual hallucination, like a vision, a prophecy. And he's like, Godzilla's coming. Godzilla's coming to clear this up.
That's right. And then what's that? It is Godzilla. Godzilla coming over the horizon, and Godzilla and Hedera throw down. They have a great fight with very weird energy. Unlike any other fight I can think of from a Godzilla movie that I recall, because It's a fight with basically no music and very little sound effects. The fight later in the movie has a lot more of the Godzilla squealing sound. This one, there are long stretches where it's very quiet, this kind of low anticipatory rumble as the two monsters just kind of regard one another and stand there swaying in the darkness. It's very unusual, very effective.
Yeah, I also like how some of these maybe all of the fight scenes, but some of the key fight scenes take place in like a great field. Like it feels like a battlefield. Instead of it being, I don't know, a lot of kaiju movies, they end up taking place on a model city or around a model city. And I don't know, this just had a different feel to it.
Yeah. Two monsters there like engines idling almost.
Yeah.
And I should say, all this is going on. The fight is sizing up between them while Yukio is still in the nightclub, and he's starting to have hallucinations of all the dancers in the club wearing fish masks, which was just so good. It's one of multiple parts of this movie that reminded me of The Wicker Man. So there are fish masks here, but then later on in the movie, all the young people, they decide they're like, well, Hedorah's here, and the Earth is so polluted, we're basically near the end of human civilization anyway. So let's just go have a big Wicker Man party on Mount Fuji, which is exactly what they do. They go up and they do a Summer Isle kind of thing. Yeah,
well, it's kind of a somber affair. They're kind of, I guess, mourning, but also ultimately bringing the fight to Hedorah. The military has mostly failed, and it's up to the youth to raise their voices in song, and then ultimately like throwing torches at Hedorah as he advances. It's pretty stirring because it's about the youth culture, and then there's this other and their role in perhaps fighting these important battles of the future, certainly environmentally. But also you have these sequences, in this whole sequence, you see these kind of ghostly looking old people watching on from the shadows with kind of somber looks on their faces.
Oh, yeah. That was one of the strangest things to me. I didn't know what to make of that. I thought maybe I had missed a scene explaining what was going on there or something. But while there is this Mount Fuji young people Wicker Man party and they're out playing guitars and dancing in the field, there are these like ghastly people of the wheat who are just standing behind these tall grassy stalks with these gray impassive faces and just watching.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot. This movie reminded me a lot in general of some of the works of Miyazaki, because he has a lot of environmental themes in his work, but also he does deal with these kind of generational conflicts as well. And I feel like, and I could be wrong on this, but I feel like that's the territory that this director was getting into with Godzilla versus Hedorah. At least just a flash of it. There's this idea of generational conflict concerning the confrontation of, in this case, environmental issues.
So maybe it's like the gray people of the wheat are kind of like the adults in Spirited Away who can't see the magic and are just sitting at the food stall stuffing their faces until they turn into pigs.
Yeah, perhaps. But of course, eventually it's all about Godzilla and Hedorah battling each other. And boy, do they battle. They battle a lot. They battle hard. Godzilla's on the ropes. There are comebacks, and then and there's a sequence where there's also flying. Like Hedorah goes into a flying form, drops Godzilla onto the side of a mountain, and then Godzilla falls into a hole, and then then Hedorah is going to like sludge flood the hole. Oh, it gets really intense there.
Yeah, horrible. So it's a part where you think Godzilla is maybe going to die. Like Hedorah throws him into an open grave of toxic sewage.
Yeah. Oh, and then, but the flying, Hedorah's not the only one to fly. Godzilla flies in this, and I don't think I'd seen this before.
I started shouting when I saw it. Godzilla, like, balls up, basically. Like, I was going to say he tucks his tail. That makes it sound like he's ashamed. He's not. He, like, balls up into an almost kind of fetal position, and then kind of blows out the radiation breath like a jetpack exhaust trail and flies.
Yeah, I thought I'd seen all Godzilla's tricks before, but this is my first time seeing this. I'm curious if this ever came up again in another Godzilla film, or if they decided not to. I mean, I thought it fit perfectly in this film. I'm not sure if other Godzilla directors would have liked it.
Yeah, I mean, if Godzilla can fly, that kind of changes the whole equation. I'm sure there have been other movies where he flies. I have a vague, tingling recollection that happens in something else, but it's certainly not all of them.
Okay.
Now, ultimately, it's one of those sequences where it involves the human characters trying to set some kind of technological trap for the monster. They're trying to electrocute Hedorah because the scientist character figures out that electricity dries out the sludge, and this is the only way it can be defeated. And if they're not able to defeat it with these big electrodes, then it will get too big for even Godzilla to handle, and then it will just take over the world.
Right. Also oxygen. So they bomb it with oxygen from helicopters a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. But like we were saying, ultimately, the military is not very good at upholding their part of the deal, and Godzilla kind of has to do everything for them. And Godzilla like sighs and shrugs his shoulders like, really, guys? But eventually Godzilla pairs his radiation breath with the giant electrodes, and of course, you know who wins in the end. But,
yes,
it's not hard to guess. But there's a lot of great stuff along the way. One of my favorite parts was when Godzilla, it almost seems like the good guys think they have defeated the monster like twice already, but it keeps coming back. And so Godzilla, having defeated it another time, starts sort of reaching into the sludge corpse body and just like ripping out guts and throwing them all over the place. Like, you get some guts and you get some guts. And all the bits of guts all dry out in the electric field. And I thought that part was great.
Yeah, just breath blast the whole field afterwards, and then it's done.
So I don't know if you noticed the same thing I did. It's possible I'm mistaken about this, but did the movie show a very brief flash of that famous woodblock, the Great Wave off Kanagawa, for a second at the end?
It did, and then I think it added the text like, "Will it happen again?"
Yeah. So I wondered, did you know what to make of that? Like, why the Great Wave in particular?
I believe this is a piece of art we've discussed on the show before. I think we talked about it on a Stuff to Blow Your Mind episode about rogue waves.
Yeah, because it's believed to depict a rogue wave. Yeah,
right. And I was looking up for like a nice, concise description of what this picture is and what it perhaps means, and I found one at the Yale University Art Gallery. And this is what they have written there. Quote, "At first glance, snow-capped Mount Fuji looks calm in the background of this print, far from the boats and towering waves. But the mountain is slightly obscured by a boat whose sharp sickle-like tip threatens to lop off Mount Fuji's peak. And recent scholars suggest that this print has political implications. Mount Fuji, a symbol of Japan, is menaced by boats and overpowering waves, both of which may imply a fear of foreign powers encroaching on Japanese shores. Indeed, in 1853, roughly 20 years after this print was made, the American Commodore Matthew Perry led a United States Navy fleet into the Tokyo harbor and forcibly opened Japan to trade." So I think we might interpret this as meaning like pollution is the next great wave, or it is the current great wave, and it is threatening Japan. And can we stop it? Can we rise up against what is our resolve against this threat?
And Godzilla himself embodies that resolve.
Yeah, I believe so. By the way, there are multiple versions. This is a very popular piece of art, so there have been various reinterpretations and parodies of it over time. If you just do a quick Google image search for the Great Wave off Kanagawa Godzilla, you will find depictions of Godzilla battling the wave, literally, depictions of Godzilla as the wave. It's pretty fun.
That's good. All right, well, should we wrap it up there?
Yeah, let's go ahead and close the book on this one. Now, if you're wondering, though, where can I watch Godzilla vs. Hedorah? If you subscribe to HBO Max, you can find it in the TCM collection there, which is where we watched it in really just glorious quality. But you can also pick it up in various other formats, including Blu-ray. And if you want to go for something special, pick it up as part of their Criterion Collection box set, Godzilla, the Showa era films, 1954 through 1975. So yes, I think this marks the first Weird House Cinema film that is also in the Criterion Collection.
Oh, I'm not so sure about that. Isn't there a Criterion of Split Second? What about Robot Jocks?
Not yet.
I refuse to believe.
I could be right. I think this is their first Criterion Collection, because I don't think Mad Love is in the Criterion Collection.
Oh, really?
And
Trancers 2, Return of Jack Death?
No, not yet. Not yet.
All right. Well, I got to say, honestly, this is one of the most enjoyable Godzilla movies I've ever seen. It's kind of notorious, actually. If you look at, lists of people ranking the best Godzilla films, it does not usually make the top tier, but I disagree. I would put it right up there with the best.
Yeah, it's pleasant to watch. So if you're looking for a Godzilla film, give this one your consideration. All right, so we're wrapping it up here. As always, you can catch Weird House Cinema every Friday in the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast feed. You can find that feed wherever you get your podcasts. But if you want to get to it quickly, you can go to stufftoblowyourmind.com, and that will shoot you over to the iHeart listing for our page. And hey, there's a store tab there. And if you click on the store tab, you'll find some merchandise for Stuff to Blow Your Mind, but also some merchandise for Weird House Cinema, including a shirt. You can finally get Weird House Cinema's logo or a version of its logo on T-shirts and stickers and iPhone covers and I don't know what else. There's just all sorts of stuff. So that's there if you want it. It's just, just for fun. But the best thing you can do to support our show is just simply to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you have the power to do so.
Huge thanks, as always, to our excellent audio producer, Seth Nicholas Johnson. If you would like to get in touch with us with feedback on this episode or any other, to suggest a topic for the future, or just to say hello, you can email us at contact@stufftoblowyourmind.com.
Stuff to Blow Your Mind is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.
This summer on Next Question with me, Katie Couric, I'm celebrating the shortest season with a fun summer series on books. I just finished writing my own memoir, which comes out this October. So I wanted to spend some time with other people who have shared their stories and put themselves on the page. And I have such an interesting range of guests. People you might know, like Sharon Stone.
I think the whole world is probably aware of how much I didn't have boundaries.
Or admire, like former Xerox CEO Ursula Burns.
I think that this is the dream of America, embodied in my mother. She did it.
Or have followed from afar, like Amanda Kloots.
I didn't hug him, I didn't kiss him, I dropped him off at the corner of Cedars-Sinai. I don't even know if he said goodbye to Elvis. I mean, we really thought I'd pick him up in a couple hours.
Find new episodes of my summer series every Thursday. Subscribe and listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.
I'm a fine Bordeaux. Buckle up.
I'm Malcolm Gladwell, here to warn you. Revisionist History's new season is completely unbound. I play chicken with cars. An Oscar winner remakes a fairy tale. I dive into your dirty laundry. I haven't decided who we rile up most, college presidents or Disney executives. You'll have to hear for yourself. Listen to Revisionist History on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen.